Eccoci. Signori e signori, buonasera.
Good evening. Let's please take our seats.
If you are so kind to take your seat, please. Signori e signori, buonasera. Sono particolarmente
It is an honor to be here amongst you, ladies and gentlemen, to interview, along with Francesca PACI from Stampa, to interview or to have a conversation with Ahmed Omar MAITEEG, a politician, but also a businessman who has a long history here in Italy, too. He's very well acquainted with our country. And today, given the situation, he will answer our questions in Arabic. As you know, the situation in Libya is one of the most difficult in the Mediterranean area, in particular for Italy, because after the fall of Gaddafi's regime in 2011, the country has lived a period of turbulence, which after 2013 led to a civil war, with armed forces from outside taking part, with the strong presence of Daesh, and above all, with a strong anarchy, which has left the land and sea borders uncontrolled for a long time. And therefore, the link with Sahel, with Western Africa on the one hand, with Eastern Africa on the other. We all know that Libya is a strategic country, not only because of its oil and gas resources. There is a gas pipeline that links Libya with Italy, the link stream, and there are many international interests there. And there's also the presence and strong influence of foreign powers. And then, of course, there's the question of the migrants, a dramatic situation where Italy has had to tackle the problems almost alone, and had to decide on the fate and the destiny of these people that emigrate from Libya towards the Italian shores of the northern Mediterranean. And above all, there's a very fundamental question. Will Libya manage to go back to being an independent, prosperous country, essential for the stability of the Mediterranean, but also for the economy of Africa? Because, as you know, Libya is the aim of African migrations. There is a process of peace underway. The mediator is a Lebanese professor, Yassam Salameh, and we would like to know, this is our first question, for Vice President MAITEEG. What do you think of this process? Do you think there is a chance of getting Tripoli and Tobruk an agreement? It is a pleasure for me to be here amongst you. Thank you for your warm welcome. Before beginning to explain the present situation, and explain the debate between the political parties to this discussion, I would like to refer to what was said by the Italian foreign minister, who spoke of the Mediterranean and spoke of relations between the various stakeholders present there, and how to create relations between the northern and the southern shores of the Mediterranean. This leads us to believe that these dialogues are positive to create a better atmosphere in our region. We know that the government is the result of the Sukhairat agreement, and this agreement was achieved after the efforts made by various persons and the Libyan elite, and the result is a united government that represents the Libyans, and the government, right from the beginning, is trying to build bridges of collaboration and trying to solve the open issues and to bring everybody together in the country, especially in the chamber in Tobruk. We also say that the president was in Tobruk before leading the government, the reconciliation government, and this makes it easier to open prospects of cooperation between the two sides. A while ago, there was a political division. Things were not looking very optimistic. It was as if there were two governments, one recognized internationally in Tripoli that carries out its duties and that controls the western and southern parts of Libya, and another government that's not recognized internationally from Baida to Tobruk. But actually, this government offers services and pays the wages, but the wages are paid by the government in Tripoli. I would also like to say that the various steps of the process up to now are very important too. There was Bernard Leon, there was Kopler, and now we have Hassam Saleh. Each of these has tried to do everything he could to solve the Libyan issue, and they found solutions. What there was in 2015, where there were military battles that led to a drop in the source of income of Libya, that is to say, oil. And when we came to a political agreement, the Sukhairat agreement, the military fighting dropped, and the production of oil has increased considerably, and this is very important for the Libyan economy. As far as the military situation in certain areas in Libya, well, that's gone down too, and There are still some groups of Daesh and other terrorist groups still in Libya, and the national government has led an offensive to free Sirte and fight these remaining powers. After having freed Sirte from Daesh, we then had a new division, or in other words, we had to unite the armed forces. And therefore, we hope Mr. Gassam Salale will be able to play his part, that is to say, and bring together all these forces, especially the military. I personally believe that Mr. Salamis will play a very positive part because he bases himself on the results achieved in the past to move forward. The stability achieved in the capital with the end of the presence of Daesh in Sirte is one thing. Now we have to unify the powers, the political and the military. As for the political powers, well, various initiatives have been undertaken, but Mr. Salam is suggesting a new presidential council representing the 3 macro regions in Libya and to have a government administering and managing the country. This initiative was welcomed by Parliament. Those who were against initially then agreed, and the Supreme State Council, but the Supreme State Council has a different opinion. So now the political agenda is going to have to be addressed in a different way. There's another initiative of having a national forum which would include all components of Libyan society that are not represented in the government. That is to say, to have a forum that brings together all the components, and in the first half of next year, well, in the past it was not possible, but this forum will allow all Libyans to feel represented, especially the ones who were not represented before, and to feel they will feel that they can express their views and be heard. But there's one fundamental thing we must not forget, that all these agreements, all these initiatives were initiated for the sake of the Libyan citizen. If there is no attempt to bring together Libyan institutions as well, though, to address only the political issues will not lead to effective results. So this is something we must focus on in the future.
Reggerà l'accordo stipulato dall'Italia con il governo libico?
Well, the Libyan government, well, there's a lot of pressure, the question of the migrants. First of all, you have the migrant flows that put pressure from Sahel, and now also the new pressure, which is international public opinion on the situation of the migrants. Public opinion is much more aware of the situation and feels more strongly about it.
بالنسبة للاتفاقية الليبية الإيطالية هي في البداية جزء من اتفاقية وقعت في بنغازي في سنة 2008.
Well, will the agreement hold? Well, this is a Benghazi agreement. It's not a new one. It was based on a previous agreement. We all know that Libya is a transit country, not the country of origin of clandestine migration. Libya has suffered a lot because of illegal migration, and we all know that Libya is not a country with many inhabitants. We have a large territory geographically, but the presence of large numbers of migrants on our territory has damaged our economy and damaged us from the social point of view too. The agreement with Italy actually makes the situation even more concrete. There is a crisis we cannot accept. In 2015, we saw that more than 1,400 people were lost at sea in the Mediterranean. And we warned everybody that there was a danger here. The Europeans felt this. We can't just sit and watch when there's a crisis of this dimension. That is when various initiatives were taken to contain this phenomenon, but some have made bad use of the agreement because the agreement was manipulated to transmit political messages that were not positive towards Libya. It was said that in Libya, a migrant has no rights. Whereas Libya does try to help those who come to Libya. They try to help the African countries, but the CNN in a video did not represent traditions in Libya. Libya's always had very good relations with the African countries. We have excellent relations with them. Libya has invested a lot of money in African countries, maybe even more than others. But the economic and social situation that we see now after a political crisis that has been lasting for over 6 years does not allow Libya to address these problems as it would like to. We have undertaken inquiries to see what actually happens in the field. The public prosecutor has undertaken investigations, and what happens with the migrants, of course, is not acceptable. Our morals don't accept that either, but we're looking for a European partner who will collaborate with us to contrast this illegal migration. Libya has done a lot, has done what it could, has offered logistic support, but we hope there will be more positive action undertaken by other European partners. The European Union has tried to do something, but that something did not meet the needs and the suffering of these people. So we would like more initiatives to be undertaken by European partners. And the agreement between Libya and Italy should be a model that other European countries can follow. That is to say, a model showing how two countries can work together towards solving the problems. Italy helped us not only for illegal migration, but also to combat terrorism and Daesh. I have a question, but I'd like to stick to the migrants issue because there's a legal issue that has to be solved by Libya. Libya never signed the UN Convention on Migrants. A migrant reaches Libya and under those conditions. So do you think that in the next few months Libya might sign this convention, which, if you like, is the key to initiating a new process?
أكيد يعني نحن نعلم جيدا أن
We know very well that immigration in Libya.
موجود في إيطاليا. القانون الليبي
Well, the law is different in Libya. There's just the political cases that are considered just political asylum. Concerning migration to Libya, illegal migration, well, this concept is not contemplated in Libya, and this should be understood very clearly. One more thing. Africans, people coming from Central Africa and try to get to Europe, do not choose Libya as a transit country or as, no, sorry, as a destination country. It's just a transit country on their way to Italy. Their stay in Libya is just a stage of their whole route. Some migrants are in Libya and cannot reach Europe. Well, they can stay in Libya for a period which is rather long. This creates a problem in the balance of the social fabric of Libyan towns. We know that some of these migrants cannot afford to stay in the towns they land on, so some become criminals. And it's very hard for us to find a solution within Libya. Macron's proposal of saving migrants from Libya, what do you think about that? Well, it's much easier than that. You don't have to go to Libya to find a solution to that problem. As we said earlier, if the French president or any other country wishes to host these migrants, they can go directly to their countries of origin and take them to their country. The problem is not saving migrants in Libya. The problem is that it is necessary to create real investment opportunities in the countries of origin and in Europe so that these migrants can either stay in their countries of origin because these investments would make it possible for them to earn their living. I don't think that somebody decides to migrate with all the risks involved if that person has a chance in his or her country of origin. So the actual choice that should be made by these countries wanting to save migrants is going to the countries of origin and create economic opportunities for the would-be migrants who would then be able to earn a living there and to live with their families and friends and relatives. Going to Libya to save migrants, well, we have laws in Libya, and laws tell us how to behave with migrants. We have one more question. Not the economic question, but since we've been talking about France, what are the interests of the various powers concerning Libya? Of course, there's Russia. The presence of Russia in southern Libya was mentioned, and apparently there's an attempt to reach agreements with tribes. In France, well, there's a conflict of interest between France and Italy. In Libya, then we have the migrants, then you have Qatar. So starting from these conflicts, what are the powers at play in Libya? Well, it's good that Libya is open to many countries. Many countries have excellent relations and always had them with Libya. In the 80s, in the 70s, Libya entertained very good relations with the former Soviet Union, today's Russia. And then, of course, these relations last in time. Italy, of course, is our first trade partner. It was before 2011, and it still is. We have excellent relations with the Italian government projects in the areas of gas and oil. The same applies to France. We have agreements in the military and energy fields. We have many French companies working in Libya. The United Arab Emirates also have invested a great deal of money before 2011. The same applies to Qatar. One of these countries tried to create some sort of political polarization, but that attempt, of course, leads to the polarization of the opposite side. So the problem is not that we have a lot of countries which have good relations with Libya. The problem is that when there's polarization on one side, there will be polarization on the other side. I think that's the important issue. Libya, however, is a country which has important resources, an interesting geographic position, historical relations with other countries in the Mediterranean basin, Arab countries. We also have an African dimension, and that's why Libya is an important country, and a lot of countries want to have relations with us. What happened after the war? Well, many countries are trying to have a position within the Libyan political scenario. Now, what about France and Italy? These are historical relations between France and Italy. This doesn't only concern Libya, it also concerns Tunisia, Egypt. Italy has excellent relations with us regarding energy, trade, and France is entitled to have good relations with us as well. There are many Italian and Libyan projects. Total, for instance, in Libya. We, as Libyans, from the point of view of Libya, maybe you may have a different point of view, but I, as a Libyan, believe that the partnership with Italy is essential in areas such as energy and oil, and we should be an example for other countries. The partnership between Italy and Libya is historically represented by the presence of Eni. You produce a great amount of barrels of oil, and a large amount is developed by Eni. Is that right? Well, yeah, Eni has a long history in Libya. It's one of, I'd say, the privileged companies. There's a very intense collaboration. We heard the CEO of Eni earlier. They help Libya to provide electricity to its citizens. Many Libyans are very happy with the situation. Concerning oil production, however, there's not just Eni. There are many local Libyan businesses working in this area. Libyans should not forget that during the crisis, Eni stayed in Libya, and we appreciate that a great deal. 70% of gas production in Libya takes place through Eni, and Eni has good prospects in Libya for new contracts. It's a very promising industry. We have 1.1 million barrels a day being produced, and we can reach 1.8 million barrels in the next future. So there's a good atmosphere. The climate is the right one to create new partnerships with Eni and other companies. Eni's investments in Libya are sufficient to last 20 years. Therefore, it's not just a relationship between Eni and Libya, but also the investments of Eni in Libya and also in Italy. That's why I call this a privileged relationship. And we look forward to entertaining similar relationships in other industries. Libya suffered a great deal during the military conflict, but next year I'm sure that our economy will bloom. The oil production reached 100,000 barrels a day now in Tripoli and in other Libyan towns. There's a certain amount of stability, and our oil companies are trying to launch partnerships with other companies. The CEO of the company went to the U.S. a couple of weeks ago. Well, because we want other countries to be able to take part in this investment program. Now, just one last question. I'm sure your Italian friends asked you, where does this oil money end? Well, our earnings from oil account for 70% of our GDP. Last year, the amount was 38 billion. The GDP was 38 billion. Well, $20 million, and 70%, i.e., 70% relates to oil. This is very important for our country, and our government uses this money for public spending. We're trying to finance development, to launch new projects in order to try and guarantee stability. Now, in the 40 or 50 years before 2011, there we don't know because it was an entirely different story. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for taking part in this panel.